excited to be here, just to talk a little bit about these new frontiers and really how brands are optimizing and making the most of connected TV. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cadi Jones. I'm the commercial director for BEESWAX across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. BEESWAX was acquired recently by Comcast to be part of Freewheel, and so you may have heard of us before, and we're now part of a much bigger entity. So in terms of what we'll cover this morning, by way of agenda, I thought it'd be really helpful just to do a quick recap around what is CTV and what is OTT. Really then to run through a little bit about what you should expect when you're buying across these this media. And then we'll come a little bit more into sort of the optimization piece, because there are some real differences when we're talking about programmatic. We obviously get really excited about the optimization side of things, and some of that can be a bit different in the CTV and OTT space. And then finally, we've got plenty of time to address any questions from the audience this morning. So that's our agenda, and I'll let us get started. So first of all, let's just talk a little bit about the difference between the two, so CTV and OTT. I think CTV is probably the easiest one to understand. It's the set that sits in your living room or wherever in your house you have your TV, and it's when you're watching any content which is served to you via an internet connection. OTT is kind of a little bit more complicated. It was initially it stands for over the top, and it was initially coined in the US, where sort of to mean that anything that was served outside of the infrastructure which was set up to power your TV. And in the US at that time, that meant cable. And so this is why I say it's a little bit complicated, because in Europe, obviously not everyone has a cable connection. And but really, I think if you think about it as anything that gets around your existing cable connection, your existing infrastructure, anything you can have without the usual infrastructure, and that you know, and it might be watched on it could be watched on a TV, but more likely it's watched on a different device, you know, a phone or a tablet, a laptop. So think of that as an example, as you know, if you're paying for Netflix or Amazon Prime. And so I thought it would be helpful just to start with that, but then we're going to focus really on CTV, so focusing on how is that digital content sort of getting onto the TV. And so in terms of coming onto that I keep saying living room, but obviously not everyone has their TVs in their living room, but there are lots of different ways that can happen. Obviously nowadays everyone has or most modern TVs are connected directly to the internet, and so that's the sort of perhaps the most obvious and easiest one. There are also set-top boxes. You have cable boxes or partner boxes that will allow that connection to happen. People are also watching video content and TV content through their games consoles connected to the internet, and then there are also connected devices such as for streaming that can enable you to, you know, you plug it into the back of the TV, and that will connect and allow you to consume that internet powered content. So hopefully that covers a little bit about what it actually is. And then I thought it would be helpful to come into a little bit more about what to expect as a brand if you're starting to think about this as a medium. I've got my little busy bee there in the picture. So in terms of you know, what to expect, I think when people are thinking about programmatic, and we're at this, we're at Programmatic Pioneers event today, the number one advantage that people think about with programmatic is targeting. And um, that is the huge advantage of programmatic to date, being able to have that one-to-one connection with your audience. However, it's worth bearing in mind that quite often through connected TV, it isn't a one-to-one connection. You're quite often reaching multiple people who are sitting in front of that screen, sometimes whole households. And so you have to think about targeting a little bit differently in this environment. And so some of the targeting categories that we see our customers using and really making the most of are kind of listed out here, and I'll call out some of the key ones. But looking at privately negotiated deal IDs, so that's where they will actually speak to their partners, the broadcasters or the SSPs, and work to negotiate deal IDs, so private marketplaces that will allow them to access the information and the data that they really want. And that might be about the content that they're advertising in. It could be in relation to data that partner might have. So lots of different flavors of that. Geo-targeting is obviously quite an obvious one. You can target by different regions, different type parts of the country, and drive different impact that way and different messaging that way. Then there's lots of customers, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. There's lots of ways that you can bring first-party data into the mix here. People are also optimizing based on the inventory source, so the partners that they're buying through. They might be optimizing and targeting using the pre-bid segments to make sure they are not targeting any invalid traffic, or to filter out fraud. People are also looking at different device types. People are looking at IP address. That varies a lot by country, how valid that is as a targeting mechanism. And then you can also target differences between sort of pre-roll and mid-roll, as you would expect in that video environment. So targeting is something to really think about, because it will be different to perhaps what you have been doing in a digital environment, as well as perhaps different to what you've been doing in a broadcast TV environment. So there's lots of new elements here to start to think about. If I come a little bit more into optimization, it's really important to think, what are the metrics that will be important for you? And we'll come back to this in a little bit more detail as well. But we see some brands are really thinking about metrics that they've perhaps been used to in digital environments. So looking at video completion rates, looking at cost per completed view. And those sort of metrics are both really focused on how is that audience actually consuming the advertising content? Are they reaching the end of the ad? Are they actively consuming the ad that you're putting in front of them? And we see our customers optimizing on top of those standard optimization metrics. They might use some of our advanced optimization techniques, such as bid models or bid modifiers, to adjust their bidding strategies based on some other metrics that might be important to them. And we can talk about that in more detail as we move forwards. It's important to think about the creative, because obviously any campaign that's going live, you'll need an operations team to execute the campaign, to get things up and running. And so there are some really important considerations to take into account with regard to the types of files and ad files that you've got prepared for them and that they're uploading and running. People, it's easy to forget about the ops team and just assume that the creative will work, but there are differences here that need to be taken into account. And then a final thing that comes up very frequently when people are talking about connected TV, but is really then the pricing of those different access points, and taking that into account, because as we know from programmatic, there can be huge variations in the price points, in the clearing CPMs that are being paid, and there are different mechanisms, either bidded or non-bidded, and potentially at a, on the auction dynamics as well, where there is some things running on a within bidding, if they're running on a first price auction or a second price auction. And so within this space, we see very little inventory available through the open marketplace, where publishers are just opening up their supply to be accessed by by any bidder. And we see much more inventory flowing through and being made available through private marketplaces, where a deal ID has to be passed, and only certain buyers are perhaps approved to access that supply. And then I've put here premium private marketplace. I think some people might think of that also as programmatic guaranteed. And that's where there is a level of commitment between the buyer and the seller, normally offline negotiation, and then a private deal being set up that perhaps other buyers wouldn't have access to. And that might be transacted if it's on a guaranteed basis, you would be taking every single impression that publisher is passing into that deal. And so it's really worth thinking about the level of the premium nature of the inventory that you want to supply, that you want to access, and thinking about the price points of that supply at those different tiers, and budgeting accordingly. And so when we come into talking about optimization, it's really worth thinking about, we've talked a bit about pricing types, but obviously on a programmatic guaranteed deal, there's very little that you can do as the buyer by way of optimization. You're really relying on the publisher providing the right targeting for your campaign, the right frequency capping, and all of those elements. But coming into PMPs, coming into even the open marketplace, there are optimizations that you can put in place. And so within that, some of the things that we see our customers really doing to take advantage of this and to optimize their activity is really looking at the supply filtering that's in place. So making sure that they're getting 100% of the bid requests that they really want to access, and 100% of the supply that's right, and maybe filtering out so they're not even being bothered by the by any kind of impressions that are coming through from other supply sources. And so that supply filtering can be really, really important, because if you're trying to buy on a very small pool of inventory and some of that super premium environment, you want to make sure you are getting 100% of those bid requests and nothing's being filtered out. We have a very strong belief at BEESWAX in data transparency, and we'll happily, through our antenna products, share with our customers their win logs, their bid logs, and even the full auction logs of their filtered supply. And so that is important, because it means that they can start to, particularly using those win logs and bid logs, they can start to build out models so that they can understand how they should most be optimizing, what is really performing best for them. We see a lot of people optimizing to maximize delivery where supply is still relatively constrained. Making sure you're able to deliver your budget in full is still a really important sort of optimization consideration. Depending on the country and the region, cross-device support can be something that is used. It's very frequently used in the US, and And so that's enabling brands to optimize through things like follow-up campaigns. So continuing the conversation with audiences who have been exposed to the TV ad, the ad that ran on that CTV environment. We see a lot of customers really looking to work with BEESWAX because of our SaaS pricing model, where we are talking about very premium inventory coming at premium price tag, operating on a basis where the bulk of the pricing is focused based on the number of bid requests, where the supply and the bid requests coming in are still fairly limited, and it can really give the freedom to test and to run significant volumes of activity against a fairly small volume of bid requests. And finally, bid shading is something that's really important when most of this inventory is coming through outside of the programmatic guaranteed, where it's operating on fixed pricing. Within the bidded environments, where most of the supply sides have now moved to a first price auction, then bid shading can be a really effective way of making sure you're not overpaying for that supply. And then I said we would come back to it to talk a little bit more about the first party data. And obviously at BEESWAX there is a really unique capability to layer your own first party data on top of the supply before you're decisioning on it. So before it reaches the bidder, where you will decide, do you want to bid and how much do you want to bid? And so with that, we have customers working in connected TV where they might be overlaying a custom geo data. They might be overlaying their own first party user data, perhaps using the IP address as the joining signal. And some of them are also using the inventory scoring data. So looking at the sort of quality of the inventory that they're getting and the learnings that they might get around the particular viewability or video completion rates, and they might add scores which they would then use for their optimization of their campaigns. And then measurement is something that's a little trickier in this environment. I think when we're thinking about programmatic, generally everyone's trying to tie measurement back to a cookie, and that's a little bit complicated in this space. But I thought it would be helpful to share a little bit about what we see our customers who are operating in a more global environment doing, because we do see through the particularly in the US, folks doing a lot more measurement where connected TV is that bit more established, perhaps looking at sort of regular measurement or brand lift studies, looking at foot traffic, like, so has their activity driven further users to their actual physical stores, and even then tying that through into sales data. So has their TV exposure driven additional sales in bricks and mortar stores? So there is measurement that can be done. It's just a question of thinking about that and how it's relevant to your business in this region. And so BEESWAX, as part of Freewheel, we have access to a significant volume of premium video inventory. I think more than 90% of the premium video ecosystem runs on Freewheel technology, and that's been made a real difference for our customers as they're able to use programmatic guaranteed to access better quality supply from quality broadcasters throughout Europe and the US. And so, in summary, hopefully today. We've covered a really good definition, so you're feeling a bit clearer around the differences between CTV and OTT. We know a little bit more about what to expect, about the different buying types, buying channels, and different levers that you can adjust by way of optimization. And so with that, I'm really happy to